I used to live in Dallas, and I never went out to that ranch, not one time. I
God,
always regret.
I've always wanted to go to that ranch because
I always regretted it too. I always regretted it too.
all right, we are live.
There it is. I guess we were on. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, but I never got a chance to go to South Fork Ranch or whatever the hell it was called. And
It's like a conference center now or something like that.
Yeah, I think it is. But I remember when I was down there, the problem is it's just enough out of the way to be a pain in the ass to have to go visit. And when I was at that age, I was more interested in stopping at every bar along the way than actually making it out there. So that's why I never went. I mean, admittedly, I don't care.
I mean, lately there's been more drama than Dallas.
Oh, there was. We're on
social medias. It's amazing. Good morning,
yeah,
Ben.
We're a little late today because, well, yeah.
Shit going on. Shit happening. Good morning, David.
Oh, what's going on, guys? How are you? Yeah, so it's Sunday. It's weird doing this on a Sunday. It certainly is. But it's one of those things. So we'll make the best of it. So yeah, we got to behave ourselves today. It'll be work day tomorrow, Mary. This is a short week for us, Mary. We're heading down to God's country on Thursday. We're heading down to Gettysburg
on Thursday. Good morning, David. Good morning, Miranda.
It's a great feeling. Hello, Miranda. How are you? Miranda was partaking in the shenanigans earlier.
Yeah, she was
on our conference thing. But anyway, yeah, so that's cool. So yeah, it'll be nice to be able to do something and get away. It's been so hot and hazy and kind of crappy here the last couple of weeks. And the weather in Gettysburg is actually really nice. It's not too different from here, but it seems to be a little less humid. So so we'll take it. So anyways,
Ben said there's not much Civil War-ish down in Texas, but I think isn't there not Altoona Pass, that's Atlanta campaign.
There's some stuff, but the thing that you have been down in Texas is you have places like Granbury you can go visit, right?
Yeah.
Places like that. And if I remember correctly, I think Ben is from the Dallas Metroplex. Mm-hmm. I think that
you two used to frequent the same bars here. He knows.
Oh yeah, outside. I love that DFW. That's a great area down there.
Barbara just asked if when we're in Gettysburg, if we can take a picture of or post a picture of the copse of trees.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. We will absolutely do that for you. But I was talking to somebody about Texas recently, and I can't remember when the hell I was doing that. It was probably with one of the baseball people, but I don't know. It doesn't matter. But I love Texas. I miss Dallas. So we have to get down there again soon. So anyway.
David Maxwell's gonna be in town starting Friday morning.
Oh, excellent. So I assume that he'll I shouldn't assume, but I would hope that if he can, he should try to make our Spangler Farm event.
I think he's going to.
And if he can't, which is understandable, definitely the Fourscore event afterwards.
Mm-hmm. Which is, I mean, I'm sure everybody knows by now, but we are doing, so Saturday, July the 1st, we are going to be out at Spangler Farm, 4:30. We've arranged a private tour with Gettysburg Foundation. Our friend Mark is going to be doing the tour. He's part of the foundation. So just kind of like, you can drive out there with your car. There's parking. So you don't need to worry about taking the shuttle from the visitor center because there won't be a shuttle going to the visitor center for our tour. And then after that, we're going to be going to Fourscore at 7:00, just kind of for a little meetup, have a few drinks, which I hope is cool in the history field, although one wouldn't know.
Oh,
David did that in Fourscore.
Yeah, excellent. Well, it's all about choices, but that's okay. But no, I hope a lot of people come out, and obviously, we'll talk about everything we always do. But Gettysburg certainly is the flavor right now because I'm excited because I'm going in a few days. Can't like a child on Christmas. So
I am too. It's exciting. I mean, and we've never been for an anniversary, and we noticed there's like the reenactments are happening this weekend as well. They do a weekend there, and man, those are some. I mean, as what's his face would call them from Confederates in the Attic. Now they're not. I mean, there's Union and Confederate reenacting going on, but that is like. That's hardcore kind of thing, right? Like there's some hardcore.
No, that's the thing. Our friend Ben Frail, he's a reenactor with the 2nd Rhode Island, and his group is of the hardcore variety. And so
but they allow women to join, which is awesome. Some groups don't allow women to join, and it's like, why not? Women were soldiers too. They disguise themselves, and
no, I mean, I think I think it's important to be inclusive like this. Yeah. Certainly with women, and it seems to be a hot topic all of a sudden, Mary. But I think it's important to support everybody, and maybe not look at people, men versus women, just look at people, right? Isn't that what's
and also
supposed to be?
Just remember that we are telling the story of history. That's it. At the end of the day,
No,
it's not about
right.
us. It's about the
It's so
story of
I'm
history.
I'm glad that they that groups like that allow them. So I do know that there's some that aren't, but I think like anything else, MJ's on here and she does that awesome Cushman thing. In
Yeah.
my opinion, I don't think it's just my opinion that she's the guru when it comes to Pauline Cushman. So
She's so good at it. Good morning.
So all the stuff going on Gettysburg, if you could avoid the bear attacks, there's a bear running the streets of Gettysburg.
Wasn't it across from the Fauna Stock?
It was right across from Fauna Stock House on Baltimore Street.
Okay. If it's across from the Fauna Stock, the bear is officially called Howard. The bear's name is Howard.
Bears, battlefields, Battlestar Galactica, right? And so that's good news. So we'll watch out for bear attack.
Brian's
and don't forget
here, and he's like, it's Brian Horahan. Suddenly I hope I said his name right. Suddenly want a Bud Light. Frank said, morning, all happy 160th Vicksburg campaign. Yeah, like before we went on, we're probably going to be talking a lot of Gettysburg today, but there's so much going on at this time in 1863 and 1864 and any time in the Civil War. But 1863, you have Rosecrans' brilliant Tullahoma campaign happening. You have Grant and Sherman out doing the whole Vicksburg thing and like fucking rattling Pemberton hard over that. And you also have Gettysburg happening as well. So there's a lot going on. And I mean, at this point, which is where are we at? Sunday, June 25th, Meade hasn't even taken command of the Army of the Potomac yet in 1863. It's still Joseph Hooker.
Yeah,
or was Joe Hooker let go and they had like a period of time?
No, he was in and out. It was right at 28th of June, right at the end. And so Meade gets the job. And 3 days later, he's fighting arguably the most important battle at that time, and certainly in the Eastern Theater anyway, one that we're still talking about today, one that the Gettysburg Chamber of Commerce is very happy that Buford inexplicably stayed out in Gettysburg and fought with those guys. So it's an interesting history. There's a lot of stuff going on. And what's important too is there's a lot of people telling the story right now. This is a great, if you're into the Civil War, it doesn't get better than the summer of 2023.
There's a lot, like there's not necessarily on Twitter, but on Instagram and Facebook, you'll see a lot of the storytelling going on, a lot of the live streams and all that happening. And it's a really interesting time.
And you know what? And there's a lot of people telling the stories with it now too. So if you're online, if you're a social media person, which I assume you are because you're on this thing, I don't know why you wouldn't be. But obviously we mentioned MJ. She's doing her living history over at Unity Park. Yeah. Jacob's on here. He does the Awesome History Book podcast. You can follow that. Obviously our friends Jim and Eric over there at Gettysburg Podcast, who's doing an event, Mary, by the way, at the mine.
They are.
Holy crap! I have to wheel you back in a wheelbarrow that night.
Well, I guess we can obviously promote that event too for them. That Jim and Eric over at Battle of Gettysburg Podcast, they are going to be doing kind of a meetup at the mine on Friday, June 30th. I think it's at 8:00, and they have like an event set up on their Facebook page. So yeah, if you're in town, definitely come to that. We'll definitely be at that. Looking forward to hopefully meeting them while they're doing that. And always they have a very good podcast. I'm still working my way through their episode on John Sedgwick, which they did with Carol Reardon, who's an amazing historian. And they just posted part 2. So I'm looking forward to listening to that. But it is a real, Sedgwick's life is so fascinating. And Reardon she knows so much about it. It's really cool.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of cool people in town this weekend. Obviously, ABT. It's the 160th, and nothing against Vicksburg. We all love Vicksburg, okay? Then they're doing a lot of stuff too. But here we're Massachusetts, East Coast, so it's a much easier drive. It just is to go to Gettysburg. So that's what we'll be doing. So we have our own events. We got a bunch of stuff we're going to be doing. We are going to be doing a Facebook Live from the gatehouse at the Gettysburg Evergreen Cemetery
on the morning of the 2nd. So the gatehouse, for people that don't know, is where Oliver Otis Howard, Dan Sickles, and Slocum met Meade when he showed up to Gettysburg in the early morning hours of July the 2nd.
Yeah, and so Brian Kinney, he's the curator there, I guess you call it. He lives there. He's the overtaker, undertaker. I don't know what you call a cemetery person. Undertaker? Overtaker? Whatever. But he's the caretaker. He's a caretaker of Evergreen Cemetery. And he has graciously invited us to do a Facebook Live. So we'll be doing that. We're going to get to go inside, show where Howard and Sickles, all those guys met. We'll get to see some of the inside of the building that's usually closed off because it's a private residence. And so
Yeah.
we're going to be able to see that. So look forward to that. Or we'll be doing that sometime on the morning of the 2nd.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay.
We'll be doing
Yeah.
that.
So that'll be fun. So there's a lot of cool stuff coming, and then we'll have a lot of fun. So that'll be pretty cool.
Yeah, it's MJ Howard reference drink. I found out something cool about Howard yesterday, speaking, and this is Gettysburg related, but apparently, and I still need to confirm it, but I found 2 sources that have basically say this was the case, but I still definitely want to confirm it 100%. But allegedly, Howard and Chamberlain were roommates at Bowdoin College, which is pretty
Yeah,
cool.
that was a cool little debate because I remember I was talking to somebody at Bowdoin not too long ago, and she was telling me that Howard never went into Chamberlain's house, and there was a big fight about it.
I
remember that
now that it was
I remember having to explain to that person that he did, and she didn't believe me.
I stand corrected.
And then she was proven wrong, and then she felt ashamed.
Corrected.
And that was so funny. That was a good time. But no, that's gonna be awesome though, because it's gonna be so many stuff. It'll be a lot of cool people in town. Definitely get out and take advantage of everything. You can't do everything. There's just too much stuff. I mean, there's this stuff going on at the Daniel Lady Farm. That's going up there. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on at the Lee headquarters. Gary's doing a thing over on the 30th of June, I believe, which is kid friendly, whatever that means. I guess it'll probably have, I don't know, balloon animals. I don't know what they're going to do over there.
Craft or something.
But they'll have some cool stuff. Gary's the man, so he'll do stuff like that. And then there's a lot of other stuff going on. And then you can play pin the tail on the bear.
Pin the tail on the bear. Howard the bear.
Well, hopefully the bear takes care of the snake issue there. For me,
there's a snake issue in Gettysburg.
There's always a snake issue. It's amazing because I'll see pictures online of people posting rattlesnake pictures and stuff like that. And I hate snake. Oh God. And I've stumbled every inch of that battlefield going through the places like Hell's Kitchen, way out in the woods. I've never seen one. And now
you do know what's going to happen now.
Oh, I know what's going to happen now. And
you're going to scream like you see a bird.
Or a high-pitched scream is also known as a gentilly now, by the way.
He's not going to defend himself.
I know he's over in Ireland right now, but there's a lot of stuff like that. But yeah, the bear pictures. I mean, if you haven't been to Gettysburg, Baltimore Pike is the main drag that runs through the town. It's kind of like your town having a bear in a tree on Main Street, which is pretty rare. And they had the deer break through the window at the Blue and Gray not too long ago.
Yeah, that's weird.
So there's some sort of Wild Kingdom mutual Omaha situation going on there.
Really weird, all that stuff happening. But yeah, there's a lot going on. We didn't release an episode this week, and we're not going to release one next week just because we have a lot going on. But our next episode is shockingly going to be about Oliver Otis Howard, but his career post Gettysburg. So we'll probably start with when he was named by Congress as one of the victors of Gettysburg, which did not make Winfield Scott Hancock very happy at all.
No, I mean,
reading more into that, which was interesting.
Gettysburg was a big deal, and it was a huge win. And a lot of people, it doesn't diminish. I mean, you don't have to be one of the 3 people that were mentioned. I mean, Hooker got credit for it, but to say the heroic things all these people did. I mean, there's it takes a village phrase thing, right? I mean, you need, for the Union to win that battle, you need all hands on deck.
Yeah.
And you had a couple of, situations where the Confederates kind of fell on their dick here and there, especially on the 2nd of July. And they made their mistakes, but they did. But again, it's funny because let me go about this now. Longstreet, right? The whole July 2nd thing, and it's funny how people fall on the spectrum with Longstreet. You're either on the Corey Farr Longstreet is good, or you're on the Bob Crick Longstreet is the worst thing since New Coke. It's one or the other. It's just how it is. But he's a fascinating study, and if you look at all the, I don't want to say comedy of errors, but all the things that took place on that day. And not even mentioning Sickles, even before you get to that point, how an opportunity was. And I've seen people bash him for sending Samuel R. Johnston to recon and not sending someone else. The thing about it, though, is, his countermarch, there was obviously a lot of stuff going on with Lee, right? And the thing, if you've ever been to Breams Hill, and that's the hill where you get up there in Round Top, you could see Round Top. Yeah. So when the Confederates were marching, and they got up to Breams Hill, and they could have been spotted by the Signal Corps, the wigwag guys, right? They countermarched. They turned around. They didn't just flip. They went like a snake. Again, that's freaking snakes in Gettysburg. But the thing about it, though, is if you read E.P. Alexander's bio, I
Mhm.
mean, he never understood why they just didn't follow the artillery, because the artillery found a way to get through.
Yeah.
And he went all the way around. But again, he's a perfect example. I know Howard is one. He's kind of a lightning rod too.
Yeah.
But Longstreet is one where it literally depends on what side of the fence. It's
Yeah.
almost
It
like
also
this.
goes back to as well, you look at Longstreet, he's still kind of, I don't want to say controversial figure in this day, but he kind of is. But he was after the Civil War too. He's a scalawag, which means we all know on here that means that he was kind of like, oh, you know what? We got to be friends. And he kind of left that lost cause. Beauregard did something similar as well. So you don't hear, especially Longstreet, you don't hear as much about them for that reason. They're scallywags. They don't really know how to deal with them because they completely abandoned the cause. And they're like, we need to be friends again with these guys. And I think there is still some hate directed towards Longstreet for that reason. And that's why when you study this, you have to consider the bias of the sort, like the bias, like what is this person's agenda? Because somebody is more likely to call Longstreet out for his, for whatever.
The problem with Longstreet, like what people on social media nowadays, is he pissed everybody off. I mean, he was raised by his uncle Augustus, who was a hardcore, slaver, secession. He was a fire eater, the phrase they use, right? And he grew up in that environment. He's going to go to West Point, class of 1842, and he'll be 1 year away from U.S. Grant, who'll be class of 43. But they're going to be buds. They're going to be good friends. As much as the Armistead, Hancock relationship is pushed, that was a real one. And as the war went on, he was there's that assumption that Stonewall Jackson was the number one guy. In a lot of cases, he was. But when you're talking about Fredericksburg, when Lee had to go back to Richmond, and he had to leave someone in charge. Out of the two children, Stonewall or Longstreet, he picked Longstreet over Stonewall, and Stonewall got all bitchy about it, right? But what's interesting,
Stonewall's such a fucking diva.
But then when Longstreet, you had down in Newburgh, North Carolina, in Suffolk, Virginia, they were held by the Union at that point. Yeah. And while between Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville, Lee, they had some time to kill. He wants those cities liberated. So who does he send? He sends Longstreet. Mm-hmm. I mean, he doesn't do it. I mean, it's why Longstreet misses a lot of Chancellorsville, because he was still what he called the Suffolk campaign. But what's fascinating about the Suffolk campaign, and no one studies the Suffolk campaign, is you had a lot of, it was almost like a slave catching mission. They were trying to catch runaway slaves too. And they were kind of all went into the town of Suffolk, and they were stuck and they couldn't get in there. Yeah. But who does Suffolk, while Longstreet, and this is where the Gettysburg connection comes in. Who does Longstreet meet in Suffolk? By happenstance, is an actor named Henry Harrison. Yeah. And he obviously know who he is. He's the spy who goes and he charges him to go find out what the Union Army's doing. He gets the intel that Meade's in charge. You've seen the movie or the book. But that Suffolk campaign is how Harrison comes about. So it just goes to show how impactful Longstreet actually was at that point, because he, like I said, he wasn't at for the most part at Chancellorsville. He was still coming back from that mission. So he's someone who deserves a lot of credit when you're studying the Confederate side. But again, because of Marshall and because of people like that, Moxie Sorrell was another one who was kind of on that Lee side. Yeah. Who kind of laid him out. And what does Longstreet do after the war? He starts making these speeches that they need to enfranchise the freed slaves, which I don't know if you know this, Mary, that didn't go too well in the South.
No, that's why he's a scallywag. That's why that's why today he's still very much kind of like an outlier when it comes to studying the Confederate side of things. He's not, there's not the hero worship of Longstreet that there is of, say, Lee or Jackson. Jacob mentions, just got to do a quick.
I was going to say real quick. Then he ends up getting back with Grant again. Yeah. So he's like you on Twitter. He pissed everybody off. He had the people in the North hating him for being Confederate, people in the South hating him for being a turncoat, and the rest of his life was basically spent defending himself. So anyway, he's a fascinating study.
I'm a total scallywag on Twitter.
I know you are.
Love it. I'm gonna wear that badge. Just pride of honor. Like that's pride for me. So Jacob mentions New Bern. He's doing an episode for his podcast, The History Book, which I think Shout out to Jacob for his history book podcast. It's really awesome. Anybody on here hasn't listened to it, follow him on Twitter, listen to his podcast. He's got some great history on there, and he's got some cool episodes coming up as well. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So he's doing an episode Newburn. I'm sure he'll do it well.
And he is going to have MJ on too. To talk Pauline Cushman, which is pretty cool. We had MJ on. She's a great guest, and she'll be a great guest for Jacob as well.
That was one of my favorite episodes, by the way, was the Cushman one. Looking back, that was a lot of fun. And it was a good episode. MJ is a stud when it comes to Cushman.
No,
so
she's very good at telling the history, keeping it balanced, keeping it real, and calling out BS where she sees it too, which is so important. You got to call it when you see it, kind of thing.
Yeah. But the Longstreet thing, there is definitely a divide with that, and to this day. Oh,
and so Jacob mentioned earlier. Oh, and Neil said, best send Longstreet to the Ottomans; they will solve everything.
Oh yeah, no kidding.
But Jacob mentioned that Longstreet goes out west, and I think Longstreet at one point had this idea Lee needed to come out west and command, but I think what happened is Longstreet was out there, and he's like, I wonder if I can take over the Army of Tennessee from Braxton Bragg, and it totally Longstreet finally was like, I've had enough of this guy's BS. I'm going back east.
Yeah, and he was a tough situation. Don't minimize the fact that he lost virtually his entire family.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
All his children. Yeah. All within a very short period of time. So those human stories that you look at these people like robots, wind up and let them go. These are humans. They're all carrying some sort of baggage when they do this stuff. But his story, and there's not a lot of Longstreet statues. There's a couple. There's only two that I know of.
One at Gettysburg, right? And then where's the other one?
There's one in either Georgia or South Carolina somewhere. I forget exactly. I'm sure somebody knows exactly where it was. I didn't expect to be talking about Longstreet today, there's not a lot of love for him, and that's just the way it is, though. But there's a lot. I give you perennial shit over Oliver Otis Howard, right? And he's another fascinating study. And history hasn't forgotten these people, but historical memory has stigmatized these people.
Yeah.
Where like the stink on a dog, never goes away. And that's the downside. And that's why it's important to study this stuff and read it. We say it all the time, because you can find good, bad, and ugly in everybody, but it's the people who hold on to those points like grim death, never let them go, pure stubbornness.
Yeah. Those and what's funny is it happens in the Civil War too in real time. You have somebody like Halleck that is adamant that Grant is a drunk, even though, Grant had an issue with alcohol, but was he an alcoholic? I don't think so. He was a microwave drunk. If you were to ask my mom, and she read a few Grant bios, she was more World War II when it came to history, but she loved Grant, and she always defended him and said he odds are he wasn't drinking. He just had a lot of stress, and it would cause headaches and stuff like that. And that was her thing, was just he would get really stressed. And also she said, what does it matter if he had a drink? I might drink too if I was going through the shit he did.
Well, that's the thing too. We all know people who you'll go out on a Friday night, they have a couple of beers and they're smashed. If only I could think of somebody at the top of my head was like that. But there are people who, I think he was like that. And I think, guys like Rollins and Charles Dane were out there to kind of keep an eye on him. But I think they realized, there was a couple of moments at Vicksburg camp, the Duck Creek thing, the Duck River thing. Yeah. He definitely got smashed on a few different occasions. But what else are you going to do in Mississippi, right?
Well, I know. And plus you're going through all that stress and stuff. AQ mentions that there's a statue to Longstreet in Gainesville at the location where his house once stood.
That's right, where his old house was. That's where it was. I knew it was somewhere down there, but he doesn't get a lot. He doesn't get a lot of love. And if you really want to read if you really want to read on him from the heavy Lee perspective, read anything by Robert Crick, because he's someone who's very, very, very critical, of Longstreet. And to Crick's credit, most of his sources come from people who were there, guys like Moxie Sorrell, guys like Lafayette McLaws. So I think there's no doubt when you're talking about that day of the battle, he was somebody who kind of, I don't want to say walk through it, but he's definitely had a little bit of an attitude. Yeah. But the reality is, if you look at that, he wanted to, with Hood, go around the rod, right? That whole thing. You have to remember too, they have no idea what the Union Army is for the most part. No. You can't get supplies. You couldn't get artillery up there. So it's you can't blame Lee for that battle plan either. No. the whole thing went to pot. And one of the most underrated reasons why is because Hood gets shot, right?
Yeah.
And what happens? You've got that
Should've gone to
echelon
the
attack.
right.
Well, but that echelon attack falls apart because
Mhm.
now Evander Law is going to go too far. He's going to head towards Little Round Top, his Alabamans.
Yeah.
We have Jerome Robertson and GT Anderson coming through, but Benning's going to come that way too instead of following Law. So the whole thing gets all screwed up right from the beginning. It ends up battling at the wheat field, but all that stuff, you're all broken up and they're all split up. And Law doesn't even know he's even in charge. He's sitting on Big Round Top, just chilling, has no intention of moving. And so that's the thing too, is people talk a lot about Sickles moving up and Longstreet having to stick up his ass and all this other stuff. But the Hood injury was a big deal. It really
just
was.
like it was, and it was a big deal at Chickamauga too. It didn't seem it at the time because the breakthrough did happen, but it's the aftermath of that injury Hood receives that will affect him for the rest of his life. It definitely affects him when he's in command of Army of Tennessee. It's interesting. And to studying these people as people is what is fascinating, just all this, like the politics that are going on and the mean girl stuff behind the scenes. Apparently nothing changes because it still happens today, but it was happening back then too. You have people who are like, I'm not following that order because I don't like that guy. Okay.
Well, there was also a chain of command orders. I mean, don't forget too. I mentioned the Wheatfield a few seconds ago.
Chain of command. You have to follow orders.
I mean, you have to follow orders. I mean, you're taking a look at John Rutter Brooke at Gettysburg. He's the final brigade to go into the Battle of the Wheatfield.
Yeah.
And as soon as those troops and the Rosewoods start breaking,
and the
Rosewoods clown, someone's telling, one of his subordinates is told, by Barnes to get your troops in there, and he goes, I don't report to you.
Yeah.
Because you want a complete cluster. Look at that Wheatfield. 13 Union brigades, 8 Confederate brigades, all battling back and forth in this 26 acre of wheat, this field. And you've got, your Third Corps comes in, Fifth Corps, Second Corps, Fifth Corps again, and it all gets mixed up, and the chain of command completely falls apart. And so that's the thing in real time. That fog of war they talk about is how things change.
Well, that's like why battle reports, each one is a little bit different. Now, they are also putting their own biases into it. You take, for example, Missionary Ridge, which, swear to God, that's a victory for Sherman, when really it's probably one of his worst days of the Civil War. There are reasons for that. First of all, he's going up against Pat Claiborne. Pat Claiborne's in a really great position, but Sherman's also dealing with the death of his child still. And that definitely factors into him he's not 100% there. He's thinking of his wife, his kid, his son that has passed away. That factors into how he's fighting. But there's this, because you can only see so much in front of you and so much to your side, that you're going to be experiencing it completely different than someone just a few feet away from you. And also, there's just different things that factor into these after action reports, and then how people perceive the battle, as well as are they trying to elevate themselves and put somebody else down?
Oh, just think of your average workspace. We always talk about you with the DQ over there, right? You've always got some kid trying to rise through the ranks.
Yep.
The Blizzard machine, drive-through, burgers, assistant manager, right? Yep. And they're trying to screw each other over, trying to climb that corporate ladder at the DQ, Mary.
Yeah.
We've talked about many, many times. But that's no
different. Some of them, though, that don't have that same ambition. The one that comes to mind, and he's at Gettysburg, is John Buford. It took him a long time to get to where he did, to get away from doing the administrative stuff, because he didn't advocate for himself. George Meade is another one that does not really advocate for himself. He didn't ask for that command of the AOP, and he's basically told, you have to do this. And he's like, okay, well, whatever.
Well, that was the thing too, is people assume, they tried to ask, obviously John Reynolds was asked, he said no. And he got the message tapped on the shoulder. You're the guy. Yep. There's no yes or no.
I think they realized how bad it was, that it was not a job anybody wanted. I mean, me, I don't want to be a manager ever. I've done it before. It's not my favorite thing to do, because you become everybody's enemy at some point. And it's, I don't know, I think Lincoln was like, we're going to have to order somebody to do it, because nobody's going to voluntarily be like, hey, yeah, I'll take this job. And I think Reynolds going in and saying like, I don't want it because you meddle too much, and I'm paraphrasing, but I think that's when the light bulb started to go off in Mead's head, or not Mead's
Mhm.
head, but Lincoln's head, that maybe I am being a little bit following too closely or telling them what to do, because Reynolds wanted complete control to just be able to make decisions on the fly. And I
Of
mean,
course, it's
he
like
kind of does
sports. If you're
that
gonna,
at Gettysburg.
yeah,
He's
yeah, exactly. If you want to be, the coach of an NFL team, you're going to want to have this. You're going to want to be able to choose the players. There was a
yeah,
coach here, used to coach around here, who said, if I'm going to let me cook the groceries, cook the meal, let me shop for the groceries.
yeah,
You know, and so that's what he wanted. He didn't want to be told what to do. Be meddled with guys like friggin' Halleck and Stanton and Lincoln. I mean, think
no
about
way.
it. I mean, Stanton and Lincoln, they whatever. Halleck at least had military experience, but it was not the greatest. I mean, he was out there in the West, and hated Grant because he knew Grant was better.
Yeah.
And eventually Lincoln came around to that, right?
Yeah. Well, Grant was and we've recently rewatched the Grant miniseries, which was on History Channel, it's amazing. It's so good. And it's great for anybody just getting into history as well. It gives you a great introduction to Grant, good introduction to the Civil War. But after that, you got to read, and you got to really question what you read. Example of that, and this again goes back to Gettysburg, and I'm going to mention Howard again, but I read an article recently, which was about Howard and Christianity, and how religion played into his, basically how he was as a commander, how he was as a soldier,
Mhm.
how he found it. But the one thing that I noticed the author doing was basically taking certain quotes and twisting the story to make Howard look bad. The undertone of the article very much was that Howard does suck. He calls out John Carpenter. That was the undertone of the article. Like, at the end of the day, Howard sucks. But he calls out John Carpenter, who was Howard's original biographer in the 60s, saying like, oh, he's too kind to him about Chancellorsville. Carpenter says it's his worst day. Like, Carpenter's very balanced in his biography of him. But what the author does is he takes one quote from Buford, where Buford writes to Meade and says, basically, it's chaotic. You need to send Hancock, right? The author implies that is done knowing that Howard is around. When Buford wrote that letter, he didn't know Howard was around. And that's the thing that gets left out. And that's when, like, twisting the narrative because you have an agenda. And that's the thing that gets left out. It's like, yes, everything was in chaos, but Buford, when he wrote that, didn't know, because he's at one end of the battlefield, Howard's at the other, and the communication hasn't reached yet. So that's why it's like, okay. And I read that part a few times, and I'm like, whoa, wait a second. Like, I don't think Buford knew. And I asked you about it, and you said, no, he didn't know. David said Stanton is terrible, 100%.
No, yes. No, but the thing about it, though, is Buford did write that letter. He says, apparently no one's in charge. It had to have been right after Reynolds was killed. And before, because don't forget, too, Howard ordered Buford to set up his cavalry along the Emmitsburg Road.
Yeah.
So he had to know by that point who was in charge. It was probably like sending an email and you send it and you can't recall shit and you can't recall it.
Yeah, there is someone here.
But it's timing. So I mean, if that letter would be written later in the afternoon, that's the whole thing, though. But again, no one knew what the hell was going on. Everything was falling apart. Hell, there are still people who blame him for the 11th Corps getting routed by Barlow. You still read that.
I didn't. Schurz is in charge.
So, and it's not an indictment of Schurz. I mean, and that was a tough situation. Barlow does his thing of blockers, that whole thing. But don't forget, too, you're fighting George Georges are in front of you. Ed O'Neill, not the guy from Married with Children, but the general. He's up there fighting for the Peace Tower is now. You've got Stephen Ramsey out there. Mm-hmm. You've got Junius Daniel out there. They're all coming towards you. So of course you're going to move out to try to stop them. I mean, you don't know that Jubal Early is coming up the Savannah behind you, but again, it's not like you've got GPS tracking where they're all wearing bells. I mean, sometimes the other team wins, and it's kind of and you see a lot of people shitting on Barlow for that, which is also
I know, and that's an AQ. She's like not shitting on Barlow. AQ knows her. She is like she's the person I go to for like anything Barlow. You got to go to Andrea Quinn, and she's got a great Facebook page about Barlow. She researches about his wife, which is awesome, really brings her story to life as well. And I mean, the thing with Barlow is, yes, he has an amazing position, but he doesn't know where the hell Gordon is. Like,
No, the
they're not, like,
reality
you know,
is, I don't want to say the only book, but the best book on the 11th Corps at Gettysburg, if you really want a good thing, is read Jim Poole's book on the
Yeah.
Crescent Moon. That's the best one. And he's been on, I think he was on somebody's.
we watched him on Adams County Historical Society. Had
Okay,
him on
we
months
saw.
ago, and it was really interesting. And he's very balanced. Like he
Well,
will call Howard out where he sees it, you know. And I completely agree that, yeah, like, I mean, Chancellorsville's a tough thing because, like, what's he supposed to do? Okay,
Yeah.
so he's getting orders from HQ saying, "Oh no, they're retreating," and Schurz is like,
wait a second, orders from AQ? The hell?
HQ. I said HQ. I know. Anyway, so, but he's got Schurz coming up and saying, I needed to set up a defensive, and Howard's like, no, you don't. And then Von Gils is like, I think they're here. And Howard's like, no, they're not. Should he have listened to them? Maybe, but he's also got to follow orders. He's in a tough spot.
But let me ask you a question. Let's suppose he does. Let's suppose he enforces, he entrenches just like Cold Harbor. Jackson has 12,000 guys.
He's getting routed.
So if you've been to that part of the, if you've been to Chancellorsville, you've been to that part of the battlefield, you have no place to put artillery. Hazel Grove is gone. Fairview is gone. You have no place to put the guns. So you're going to have to be right in that field, right where the woods ends. I'm telling you right now, if he entrenched just like Cold Harbor, just like Spotsylvania, Longstreet, Jackson's routing him anyway. And that's what's unfair about it is, of course, history being, 2020 being my benefactor here. If you've been to that ground, it's hard to imagine anybody, unless you put the whole friggin' army there. I mean,
Howard couldn't, because Barlow was somewhere else at the time. There's not enough time to move his men up there. And it's really just, you said it yesterday, it's one, what did you say? One division getting routed by an entire corps, right?
Well, I mean, you did have the 11th, it was the 11th Corps. I mean, it was the whole thing. But again, you have forget the element of surprise. That's an unwinnable situation, right? Yeah. You're going to have, I don't know the exact numbers that they had at that time, but it was certainly less than 12,000.
Yeah. I
mean, the average Union Corps was about 8,000 to 10,000 for the most part. And by that point, the line of Stonewall's line was so long. When they were attacking, the rear element was still at the camp waiting to go. That's a traffic jam for you. You've been on that road in Chancellorsville, down by Catherine Furnace up there. Yep. And so it was just relentless. And the lack of artillery, you can't shoot at them in the woods.
Nope.
We walked the woods that day, remember?
Yeah, and that's impossible. And like what they see first is they see all these animals coming out, and they're probably like, oh, that's interesting. And the next thing you know, it's like Jackson's guys, they're getting routed like at Chickamauga. It's almost like that, this surprise. David said, no alcohol for me this morning. I have to play 1860s baseball and superheat in a couple hours. Drinking comes later.
Oh, is that David? Are you doing that Gettysburg thing? The Gettysburg baseball thing? I always wanted to go to that.
No, he's not there. He's not there until Friday, so he's doing something.
Oh, okay. 1860s baseball. But the reality is it's easy to cast aspersions. I'll take this to my grave. Is I don't think you could put anybody there. Reynolds, pick one. They're going to get routed. It's just
they all knew it too. They all knew it.
And the person you really want to blame is Hooker. You know why? Yeah. Because he had his right flank in the air, right? Yeah. And it's not. I mean, think about it. Sickles gets ripped for moving his position, right? Yeah. Howard gets ripped for staying in his position. So how do you win? How can you win?
You can't. And I mean, and then you have the thing, Howard does learn from it because Ezra Church shows that, AQ mentions Confederate personal accounts, and J.B. Gordon too said that Barlow's men fought harder than they ever had seen. Barlow had under 2,000 men.
I would invite you to read John Brown Gordon's memoirs about that battle. And he says, and I mean, he has no reason for hyperbole because he's an angry Reb, especially, especially at the beginning. He says that Barlow's men in 11th Corps fought hard, like AQ said, harder than any soldiers they fought in the entire war. So the impression that the second that Early in Gordon showed up, they turned and ran. It's just factually not true. It's just not. It's a lazy, safe narrative for the people who want to rip on Howard, but you can't even do that because he wasn't even in charge then.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? The focal point of the Battle of Gettysburg was Cemetery Hill, was the focus on July 1st, July 2nd, July 3rd. Howard had a big part of setting up that defenses on Steinwehr, with von Steinwehr, with Orland Smith, and what are you going to do? But that's history, though. That's what's cool. Is that there's no right or wrong. It's all interpretation. Somebody could say that it was completely Howard was in charge, but and doesn't mean they're wrong or I'm wrong. It just means that that's just your interpretation of it.
Yep.
That's where people get in trouble, is they think their interpretation is this end all be all. That's just my interpretation of it,
Yep. No, I completely agree. But yeah, and Gordon gets criticized a lot for his memoirs. And I get it. He has lost cause. He's going to. But there is some truth to what he says in there. His account is taken as one of the ones that we go by for Appomattox.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's, really something that we have that and people don't believe him.
Yeah. Well, again, because it's easy to pick and choose. You could pick any book. You could pick Bruce Catton. You could pick Henry Fonz, any Henry Fonz, any of those people, and they're going to have their interpretation. Like I mentioned before, it's their interpretation of history. It doesn't mean it's 100% correct. And we go back and forth with people on Dan Sickles all the time.
Yep.
And you go back and forth with Howard all the time.
Yep.
I'm of the belief that Sickles didn't do anything wrong. I'm just going to say it, right? And again, it's easy to look back on a looking glass and say, well, he got his core wrecked, because he did. He absolutely got his core wrecked. The remainder of his core ended up in a division. They got slaughtered at Spotsylvania. So they had a tough ride, those guys.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, you're getting conflicting orders. This is not an indictment of Meade either. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It just is that fog of war we talked about. And don't forget, too, the reason why the Wheatfield got routed was because the 2nd Carolina took the wrong orders and they exposed their flank. And it forced Tilton to vacate the dance floor, because Barnes told him that if your flank is just threatened, you need to get the hell out of there. So he leaves, Jacob Schweitzer leaves, and then you've got de Trobriand down by the wall down there, and he's getting shot from the back, and he's getting fired from the front from G.T. Anderson, all because of a mistaken order. That's the fog of war. It is what it is, but that's what happens.
Yep. Exactly. No, I completely agree. It's like there's a fog of war that goes into it completely. Lots of different stuff is factoring into these battles and all that. And what was I going to say? Lost my train of thought.
Well, that train doesn't run very fast.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't.
Especially the IPAs are flowing through it.
Right. Exactly.
Like yesterday, we had some good beers yesterday.
We did. Yes. And we had some good history conversation as well with our friends and all that, which is awesome.
Yeah, some bad baseball last night. Freaking Braves. But it was a good day though. It was a good day overall. But but that's the thing though, is that you can look at history and say, well, Charles Tilton, Tilton had to, did he run? Yeah. And did he run because did he cost the Union the Wheatfield? Well, he had orders to.
Yeah.
He had orders
the thing is that you have to follow orders.
Yeah.
Like you have to follow orders. And Miranda, my interpretation of Jackson is 100% correct.
Oh, of course it is. But you know something, Miranda, I'll tell you something plain. If you think it's correct, it's correct. Because that's your interpretation.
The thing. We can all have our own opinions. And the thing is like, yesterday I had a friendly debate with somebody on Twitter, shockingly. His ancestors in the 61st Pennsylvania, I think it was, and they were routed hard at Chancellorsville. And, I kind of was like, look, I'm saying Howard made a mistake, but they were adamant, like, there's different things factoring into it, like suppression of battle and all that. And it didn't divulge into anything bad. It was a good discussion about what happened, and I learned something. He sent me a link to this page that they're making about the 61st PA and some of the other German regiments at Chancellorsville. And it was really interesting to read, and to find out that these guys after Gettysburg, they are sent out to South Carolina. And I didn't know that. So it's interesting what you can, learn when you keep it to the history and you stay civil.
Well, it's all plug and play. I mean, for the most part with these guys, we talked a lot about John Bell Hood's guys after Nashville. I mean, for the privilege of surviving a horrible walk in the snow back with no shoes, they end up getting shipped off to North Carolina to fight at Bentonville. with Joseph E. Johnson. So these guys, especially at that point in the Confederacy, we talked a lot about it when we were talking about Cold Harbor. They just didn't have the numbers, and the numbers were just going down the tubes for both sides. It is amazing to think about the absolute carnage of that war, especially the Confederate side, of how many people they lost. It's one of those things you can't just crack. It's easy to see a number, but if you quantify it, but you can't qualify it to think about. So we said this a million times. How many future important people in the history of this country were killed in the Civil War that we'll never know what they did.
Yeah.
Right.
I know, we'll never know. And it's on both sides, right? You could have Confederates who are killed that we don't know what their ancestors could have done, what good they could have done. It's just like, the ones that, the ones that did die during the Civil War, particularly somebody like, even Hiram Granberry or Pat Claiborne, we don't know what they could have done for Reconstruction.
They might have done nothing. Charles Tilden went back to Maine and just was a shop owner. That was the end of it. He was a colonel. He wasn't one of these big shots like Granberry was, but it's tough to say. But we saw what Longstreet did. We saw what John Mosby did as far as helping Reconstruction. Even John Brown Gordon, we mentioned a little while ago, he made his ploy. Granted, he wanted the Union out of those military districts. He didn't like that too much. He wanted the state rule again. He wanted fair elections. He wanted those Democrats to win their state elections in Georgia. But a lot of these guys are very instrumental with that. I know that the Reconstruction is not the sexiest thing to study. It's just not. But if you read Gordon's stuff about his work with guys like Alfred Colquitt, Joseph Brown, that Bourbon Triumvirate, they called it, in Georgia, it's fascinating politically. It's because it's corrupt as hell, and they're trying to railroad people with railroads, literally. But it's a fascinating piece of the puzzle to study. Mm-hmm. But it's not sexy like the war is, unfortunately. It's just so people don't study it.
No. And AQ says, thank you for the shout out for my work on Frank and Arabella Barlow. Have a great Sunday. Looking forward to Gettysburg 160th. So am I. I'm definitely looking forward to getting out of town and immersing myself in history.
That's going to be a lot of fun. That's going to be great, because I think we'll see a lot of people who have a lot of laughs, and I think we'll probably have just debates like this. We'll be sitting at the mine, we'll be sitting at Fourscore, or sitting wherever, and just shooting the shit about this stuff. But it's good because it's amazing how I could speak to myself how I've changed on certain things just by studying more and researching more. And that's the thing, is you got to keep an open mind with it. You absolutely do.
Yeah, exactly. There has to be an open mind. Have to be accepting of all opinions and all that. And Ryan's on here. Ryan actually has an online talk happening next Saturday, July the 1st as well, about Phil Kearney.
Yeah, that's cool. No, he's definitely a Phil Kearney guy, and he's somebody who, and he's another untimely death in the beginning. Yeah. And he was somebody who, we've talked about this before, he would have been a huge instrumental person at the core level if he didn't get killed at Chantilly. And that's the thing when you look at Phil Kearney, and we got in that debate before about the Second Corps, does he take over for Hancock instead of Hancock? And then who knows, maybe he does, maybe he doesn't, but it's one of those great what ifs of another guy who was taken early. That really hurt the Union cause, definitely, because you can't go to the Phil Kearney store and get a new one, Mary.
Yeah, no. He should have been able to. He's one of the ones that we've had a really good what if discussion over. What if he hadn't been killed at Chantilly? Where does that leave? How does that factor into command structure of the Army of the Potomac? He's like the other guy we talked about on the Confederate side, shockingly not Albert Sidney Johnson, but Zollicoffer, who was killed at, where is it? Springs or Pea Ridge?
Mill Springs.
He's
Felix Zollicoffer is another one that people don't really study because he's not part of that mainstream Civil War conversation. Yeah. But he was a young and rising star in the Confederate Army, and so people talk a lot about Johnson, ASJ there, but he was somebody who was a big loss. But there's a lot of guys like that. Granted, Franklin we talked about with all those generals who got killed, Hiram Granberry specifically, and Claiborne specifically, that they were big losses. Granted, the war was pretty much over at that point, but maybe if they survive that, those guys get sent east with those Confederate troops to fight Sherman. And who knows how history goes, how it changes, the butterfly effect. It changes on a dime. But yeah, that's what's great about history is that you can debate this stuff and you can kind of fill in the gaps and try to use your judgment on certain things. And
Hmm.
but yeah, unless you're talking math or science, there's no right or wrong. It's
No.
just
No.
interpretation.
And the what if game it's a way to show, I think, not, I shouldn't say what you know about how you interpret things. Yeah, Ryan says definitely slated for core commands, only division commander of the AOP in Peninsula, not to be a West Point guy.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, that he's somebody. Every time I drive by Kearney, New Jersey, on the way down to Washington, I see that sign. I always think about Ryan. Sometimes I do, but I always think about Kearney because again, that, just a huge loss that was, because it really did rob. It was, people talk a lot about Reynolds, but the Kearney's the bigger loss.
Yeah.
He really is, in my
Yeah.
opinion, anyway.
Oh yeah, no, I think Kearney is a much bigger loss than Reynolds, just because Kearney was, I think he was well liked.
Well, Reynolds had peaked. He wasn't
Yeah.
going any higher than Core because he
No.
turned down the big chair. He might have got sent west theoretically, but Kearney was a rising star. And I think he's somebody who would have done well. Ironically, they both got killed by running too close to the front.
Yep.
One on the head, one on the ass. They're coming and going.
Frank, I'm thinking about what if Buster never got shot in the armpit?
Twice.
Yeah.
2 times. That's what's so fascinating about the Michael Shara book is of all the places Buster got shot, he got shot in the armpits. It's just so weird. It's just,
Yeah.
it's just funny how, exactly. But no, but you could talk about this on both sides all day. And that's the sad human element about this thing. My guy, David Ireland, he was tragically cut down
Yeah.
by disease in Atlanta. And he was another guy. I mean, granted, he was at the regiment level 137th.
Yep.
But he was all he did was win, right?
He
Like
was
that song.
He was so good, and nobody talks about him as much as they should. He gets overshadowed at Gettysburg, but I mean, what I find fascinating, he goes out to the Western Theater, and he's just as good out there. He goes up against the best the Confederates had in Pat Claiborne, and he does relatively well given the circumstances at Ringgold Gap. I mean,
if you go to Ringgold Gap, okay, and you actually go to the 137th Monument right outside a little power station there, and you see how close they got to the Confederate line, which is right there at the depot, right?
Yeah.
They were maybe 100, 200 yards from that entire line, subject to artillery fire from both hills, infantry fire from the front. And Ireland got there. I mean, and he survived it, was able to get the hell out of there. It's one of those tragic ironies, I guess, that he survives Gettysburg. He survives, Chattanooga. He survives Ringgold and gets killed by disease.
Yeah,
that
sucks.
sucks.
So sad. Oh, Ryan's got a question. Any views on Jesse Reno and his early death? Don't know much about the guy.
Well, he got killed at South Mountain. He was another one. Because and you can make a case for guys like Jesse Reno, for current, that they're cut down, but they don't get the press because when they die, they move on to the next guy. They just keep going. But Jesse Reno is a big one. He's got a beautiful monument there. If you go to the Gap there, you go check out that monument. But he's another bad one. I'm glad you brought him up though, because Reno's death is one that again robbed the Union of another up and coming guy, especially when it happened. You're talking 1862. You're not even the halfway mark yet.
Yeah. Now with Jesse Reno, I don't know much about him, but is he Union or Confederate?
He's Union.
Union, that's right. Okay.
So they're going to get killed Battle of South Mountain, back where the Iron Brigade got their nickname, and he's going to be cut down. And he's got a great monument right on the side of the road there. You can go check. He's one of the few monuments with names on it. A lot of them are just regimental stuff, but he's another one. But you can go down the list on these, and there's so many. And who knows what these people would have done, not only later in the war, but after the war.
Yeah.
With that experience. And not all of these guys are West Point guys, right?
No, they're not. And I mean, I had a discussion, Blackjack Logan came into the discussion the other day or yesterday that I was having, and it was regarding command of the Army of the Tennessee. And, the people I was discussing with all agreed Howard was the right choice. And Earl J. Hess actually does a great job of explaining why it was Howard. It was not just the West Point stuff. There was other reasons too. But Howard had the administrative side of it that, again, goes back to West Point. But Howard was also, and this is my own opinion on it, Howard was also very much the adult in the room. He's not a party animal. Blackjack Logan was. It's kind of like, Blackjack Logan was good where he was. To put him any higher, he's kind of a loose cannon, and Sherman said he needed soldiers that would follow orders. And at the end of the day, that was Slocum and that was Howard. And say what you will about the two of them, but I think they were the best choices.
Yeah, at the time,
not just like Howard, especially for command of the Army of the Tennessee, but also for the March to the Sea as well.
Yeah, those choices are not made on a whim here.
No.
I mean, some of them, and there's a lot of thought, which it does bring up the whole, Burnside promotion, how it's mind numbing, but they put a lot of time into that. They have to think about it. Now, by the time they got to June 28th and Meade was a guy, they were sick of trying to pick. That was their guy. And to give Meade credit, he fought the battle the way he thought it should be fought. He was able to handle the retreat the way he thought it should be handled. But then not long afterwards, when Grant comes over, I don't remember a lot of Meade bitching about that. No. He took it. He took one for the team with that. He had issues with guys like Sheridan, no question about that.
Yeah, big time.
But he certainly didn't. To my knowledge, I'm sure there was conversations he had privately with people that he was pissed about it. But he was a soldier and he did his job. He still commanded the AOP all through Overland campaign. Now he shit himself at Cold Harbor. He did. That was not a good moment for the old snapping turtle, admittedly. But again,
they all had bad moments. They're all human,
Yeah, of course he did. Yeah.
Like they all have these bad moments, and especially, we just did the episode about Overland campaign, one of the battles of the Overland campaign, Cold Harbor, and it's not a great day, and the other thing that you have coming up soon is the battle to save Washington, D.C., which is Monocacy. Mm-hmm. And you're going to see Grant have to shuffle those troops back to the defenses because they need them there. And it turns out that, yes, I think Grant at the time was right in taking those troops from the defenses. He needed them. But then it's like, oh shit, we got to get them back there because Jubal Early is going to march on Washington. But luckily, Lew Wallace saved the day too. I mean, he doesn't get enough credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things going on. I mean, what's great about that part of the war is all the moving parts.
Yeah.
I mean, and this was you give Grant a lot of credit, is you've got David Hunter and then Sheridan going down the valley. You've got Sherman doing his thing. You've got Grant doing Overland campaign. Everything's moving. And so if you're Lee or you're Jefferson Davis, you can't, it's like whack-a-mole. You can't stop all of them. But yeah, they were surprised when they were sieging at Petersburg, that Jubal Early was able to break away and make that run towards Washington. He had to shuffle that 6th Corps, who doesn't get enough credit, by the way, because you know why? Because they don't do a lot at Gettysburg. So unfortunately, they don't get a lot of press for people who study the Gettysburg battle. But you had to Fort Stevens, you had to push them back. And so there's so many little things about that. But Grant has the tools to be able to shift people. He can send a corps up, send a division up, where the Confederates at that point were pretty much just being strangled.
Yeah.
And somebody, I was talking to somebody recently who was like, well, why? It was actually somebody one of my work clients, they came in, they said, we were talking Civil War, and he was going about how he said Grant missed an opportunity to sack Richmond when he chased them through Farmville and chased them through Appomattox. I'm like, well, therein lies the dilemma. His goal wasn't Richmond. His goal was Lee at that point.
Yeah.
So he didn't miss an opportunity. He could have walked into Richmond, but he wanted Lee, and that's why he chased Lee.
Yeah.
And it's, people don't realize that, that May 8th, 1864 is an important date in American history, because that's the date when they decided we're going after Lee. We're not going after Richmond. And that was, and then right after the Wilderness, that was it. So, you want to talk about turning points? That might be the biggest turning point.
And it was literally a physical turning point as well, which is cool because there's a point during the Overland campaign where Grant is on his horse Cincinnati, and he has a choice to either retreat or to turn the other way and go after Lee. And that way also happens to be towards Richmond. And he takes Cincinnati and he turns them, and the troops, it just boosts their morale. And that's an example that I took a management course as part of my MLS, which was one of the best courses I've ever taken. I learned so much. But we were talking about good management and leadership styles and just examples kind of outside of, the typical corporate environment. So the one I gave was Grant being on Cincinnati. And I said, this is why managers need to lead. And it's also, if they expect their employees, in this case, the troops, to do it, they have to do it themselves. And that's what Grant did. He's like, he knew what he needed to get his men to do, but he had to show them that he was with them 100%. And by turning on his horse, which that's a powerful figure. Cincinnati was a gigantic horse. By turning his horse and doing that, he leads. And his men follow,
Yeah.
and it boosts the morale at a time when they needed it.
Well, it was a big sea change. I mean, there was those soldier diaries. We're always retreating.
Yeah.
We're always retreating. And Grant was, and what was great about Grant was he would not let Lee seize the initiative. That was the thing. With Lee losing all those guys, there was no real ability to counterattack. You had the beginning of Cold Harbor when they attacked Sheridan, but after that, Lee didn't have that Cold Harbor. Didn't have one regiment in reserve at that point. He had that 5-mile line with nobody. And if it wasn't for those entrenchments, that might be the end right there, because Grant burst through. He's going to defeat that army in piecemeal, and that's going to be the end of it in the East anyway. And it's an existential moment for Lee where it's win or else. And because he does win, it ends up at the siege of Petersburg. It ends up with all the 10-month siege, Appomattox, the Five Forks, the whole deal. It goes from there. But again, that was Lee's last victory was Cold Harbor. That was it.
Yeah, and you think about how long till the Civil War ends that Lee has that big victory, and you're sitting in an essential stalemate in the Eastern Theater.
Well, you give Lee credit because he wins Cold Harbor,
yeah,
and he holds that gigantic 2-to-1 man advantage of Lee's of really it's Meade's army with Grant calling the shots. He fights him to a stalemate at the Wilderness, Spotsylvania, North Anna. Right. So he's able to hold the line and survive, even though he doesn't have as many men. But that war of attrition is working, though.
Yeah.
But it's also hurting the Union. We were saying before, Grant was losing 2,000 men per day in the Overland campaign. So the hourglass was running out for him, too, even before he goes to that 2nd Connecticut, 8th New York heavy artillery we talked about. It's finite. Yeah. We said before, like earlier, you can't go to the soldier store and go pick up new soldiers. And that's why those heavy artillery guys come, because they were trained militarily, but not in battle. And why Meade put them at the head of the spear to fight, we'll never know, but he did.
And it's interesting to see all these different moving parts that are happening in 1864. Grant is bleeding men, but he's able to replace them. Lee is bleeding men, and he's not able to replace them. And, months before the Overland campaign, you have Pat Claiborne write up his emancipation. He presented in 1864 to what was probably a stunned room, and also you can see Joseph E. Johnston and Hardee sitting there being like, dude, slow your roll, not cool. Even though I think they were kind of like, at this point, the jig is up, we're going to lose. But Claiborne sat down and did the math. And his math on how many soldiers they were going to lose in the Confederate Army and not be able to replace was pretty accurate. He predicted exactly what would happen, and what happened did. And the interesting thing about that emancipation is it doesn't get discovered till years after Claiborne's death. Nobody knew about it.
Yeah, that was a situation. He was a little bit ahead of the time with that. That would have been a gigantic thing. I mean, Davis didn't come around, but by then it was too late at the end at that point. But that Emancipation Proclamation and that shot in the arm of all those extras, those USCT guys, that's I don't want to say it made the difference. I think the Union was going to win anyway, but it certainly probably expedited it.
Yeah, but I do wonder now, and I'm just thinking this, I'm spitballing here, but like, I do wonder if Claiborne's emancipation order, part of it he put in place because he found out, he obviously knew about the USCT guys they were putting the African Americans in the army, obviously, which was a great decision on Lincoln's part. But I wonder if he saw that and he was like, shit, we got to do the same, or else we're not going to win.
It would have been a really coup if they did it. If the Confederates did it, because it really would have neutralized a lot of the war over slavery thing. Because don't forget, a lot of the guys in the North weren't fighting for slavery. They couldn't care less about it. Some of them didn't like it. Yeah. But they were fighting for that. So it would have helped neutralize that. It would have given the Confederates more men. But again, it went against the politicians. Yeah. But there was no doubt about it that there's a finite number of guys. You're talking about an industrial country versus a rural country.
Yep.
And so
Sherman said it best when he said it to his friend Boyd at the LSU that one night. They were sitting there probably drinking, and they're talking secession, and Sherman got really riled up, really angry, and said, "You're not going to win." it's going to be a long drawn out war, but you're not going to win because you're going up at people who are industrial and you got like, you don't have it. Frank just said,
Well-
I would have loved to have been a witness at the Claiborne proposal just to see the reactions of those generals.
Well, if you read the book there by Simmons, he describes it about the people, the jaw dropping. It's like when you
What?
order, it's like when you order a water at the Second Wind Brewery. What? I mean, that's the thing was they were stunned and they tried to hide it, but it got out. And he was blackballed because he was Irish, and we've talked about that, but that was a real deal. It was a real
I
deal,
understand. No, I understand that.
But again, that's what it was, and that's why the whole thing about him not getting into the pharmacy school in Ohio stings for the union.
Yeah, because you got to wonder if that is like, and also being asked to go move to Helena, Arkansas, to go run things down there. You know, I do think that if Pat Claiborne had stayed in Cincinnati, made his home there, he would have fought for the North. And he probably would have been up there with Grant for great generals. He probably would have been in the Western Theater. So you have Pat Claiborne fighting at Chickamauga.
He was going to hit that glass ceiling in the North too, by the way.
Oh, no, I understand that. But what I'm saying is he would have probably been division commander, just like he was, you know, but you would have seen him fighting at Chickamauga. But there he is fighting for the North.
Yeah, he could have been.
And how does that kind of like, does he go on the march to the sea? All this other stuff. Is he the one that, you know, who knows how that factors into when Sherman kind of went crazy, he had that breakdown? Like, does Pat Claiborne somehow take some position? Who doesn't rise because of that? It's a really interesting what if Claiborne fights.
Those are fun bar stool conversations to have. I know, and I know people. Some people don't like it because it isn't what happened. But I think, like we've said a million times, if you can do the what if thing really well, it means you did know what happened. Okay. And you're just simply trying to talk about an alternative to what did happen. But you have to know what happened to do a what if thing successfully. That's why the whole Stonewall at Gettysburg thing drives me to freaking tree. It's just ludicrous. But that's again, that's the reality of it. But it's good though. It's fun. I mean,
Frank was like, would he have befriended Buster? No, because he would have been in the Western Theater.
Oh, we don't know that though.
I'm going by that because of Lytle. Lytle was in Western Theater, Cincinnati. Odds are that
maybe he ends up one of those Ohio brigades who comes out east, right? Yeah, maybe he does that.
That's true. I only say that because Lytle fought in the Western Theater.
Maybe he's fighting with the 8th Ohio at Pickett's Charge. Right? You never know. You never know. See, I could have my what if too, Mary.
Oh, I know. I just go by that based on Lytle.
You're not always right. You don't have a PhD. You're not always right.
Oh, trust me, I'm finding that out quite quickly.
I know you are. You certainly are.
Yeah. Apparently, I've burned a few people hard.
Elmo meme.
Yep.
But that's the way life is.
But on.
Yeah, but that's cool though, because he's somebody who certainly deserves a lot of study. We are going to have Simmons on the book club. When are we doing that? We haven't done one of those book clubs
in September, and we also have another one, Maine and Gettysburg, which we need to get in contact with the author about that.
When are we doing that one?
We have to set that up. Yeah, probably August.
Yeah, we'll do that when we get back from Pennsylvania. But we got Gettysburg on the brain right now, Mary. Not gonna lie to you.
Yes, Gettysburg, but I'm still like Vicksburg, Tullahoma.
That's fine. But we ain't going there. That's the thing.
Yeah. Miranda, this Claiborne is like Christmas Eve. Lead their own Irish brigade. You need to do a meme.
If what?
Claiborne and Buster lead their own Irish brigade. You need to do a meme.
I don't like making fun of Buster, Miranda. He died in battle. It's very sad. Show some respect, Miranda. No, but there's a lot of stuff too. But no, we're looking forward to it. I think speaking of Frank, he's coming to Gettysburg, right?
He is.
Frankie, you're coming? Oh, very cool. So hopefully
Frank loves Claiborne, which is awesome.
Why the church bells go
off? Because it's 11:20 and apparently they need to go off every 2 hours.
Must be. There's a church right next. There's a church right next door, and every time we walk by, lightning almost hits Mary.
Yep.
But we have to deal with the bells every couple hours. But anyway, but that'll be fun. That'll be cool to meet him. So Frank, hopefully you're coming to our Spangler event, because that'd be cool. And hopefully we'll be doing some other stuff. But I'm looking forward to it. I think there's a lot of stuff, but obviously going to keep an eye on, definitely going to keep an eye on Vicksburg, keep an eye on Tullahoma. There is a lot of stuff going, no question.
I mean, my personal favorite thing about the Tullahoma campaign is this is where Wilder and his Lightning Brigade really find their own. You know, they have that one battle where they don't lose a single person. They go and fuck with the Confederates. They're chasing them back and they get back without losing a single person. And that was kind of the thing where Rosecrans was advocating for them, saying, I need mounted infantry. And I think Stanton and Halleck were like, mountain infantry don't work at all. Like, they're useless. And then Wilder is kind of like, hold my beer, and goes and does his shit and proves himself completely. And Wilder is this guy that he is so underrated, doesn't get talked about enough. We saw his grave in Chattanooga. You couldn't ask for a more nondescript grave of the mayor of Chattanooga. He's a really amazing guy. And he's like, the War Department doesn't want to spend money on the Spencer repeaters. So he's like, well, F it. I'm going to use money from my own bank account and equip my men with them. So he does it, and he proves himself in that one part of the Tullahoma campaign where he just he just goes to basically harass them, and he comes back. Hasn't lost a single guy.
Oh, he did get his money back for the guns, though.
Oh no, I know he eventually did. Yeah, because they realized, like, geez, these rifles actually, they're great, they work. And if he hadn't done that, he wouldn't have been able to do what he did at Chickamauga in September. And
no, but don't forget too, Nathan Bedford Forrest did the same thing.
Yep.
He spent his own money, and that's really what got him. He ran out of money.
Yeah.
But he financed his own operation.
Oh, Frank's going to be at the Reliance, I think, on the 30th, on the Friday night. He said he's flying from California. Really looking forward to the Simmons Book Club, and he's going to be at Spangler too. So that's awesome.
Oh, that's cool. They'll have a good time with that. It's always good to meet people.
Yeah, Frank's a good kid. Frank's a good kid. He won our trivia one night too.
He did win the trivia. There was one person who won the trivia.
Leonard.
He did. There was one person who won the trivia who never got back to us on his book. I still have it. Maybe who knows?
Who knows?
So it is what it is.
Who knows?
But there's going to be a lot of stuff going on. You can't do it all. Good luck getting into the restaurants and bars. By the way, it's like going to Disney World when you go there. You're gonna have to plan and pick your times, because there's going to be a lot of people, because COVID's still. It feels like we're kind of through all that now. So, and this is the 160th. I think this is going to be the biggest crowd there probably since the 150th, probably, realistically speaking.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's going to be. I can only imagine how much you're getting for hotels down there right now. Anybody?
I can't even imagine.
I mean, if anybody was going to Gettysburg, if you don't mind, just like, how much are they getting for hotels this weekend? I could only imagine how the screwing they must be giving people for hotels, because there's not a lot of them. It's not a lot of them.
No, there's not. Oh, and Miranda's got she does a podcast for the Illinois Historical Society. Her next episode is about Burnside ordering a regiment from Camp Douglas to shut down a Chicago newspaper for printing anti-war options in June of 1863.
Yeah, that's true. MJ's head note. MJ, we'll talk soon.
Friday.
Stay out of trouble, MJ.
Yep.
but
don't be like me.
Yeah, I think she's well on her way.
Don't be a scallywag.
She's well on her way. But there's a lot of stuff going on, but there's not a lot of hotel space, and that's the thing too, is all the prime ones in at Cemetery Hill, 1863. I can only imagine where they're getting a Farnsworth house this weekend.
Yeah. Oh my God, that would be a cool place to. I mean, Farnsworth is a really cool place to stay. Great, like, I don't know, one of the most comfiest beds I've ever slept in, honestly, in that Chamberlain room.
Yeah, well, after 38 beers, any bed's gonna be comfortable, but that's but I digress. Speaking of bloody armpit.
But so we'll have to re-release our Tullahoma episode, because that was a fun one to record, because that is, and Dave Powell's got some books about Tullahoma. I know Dave Powell and Eric Wittenberg have a book also about Tullahoma, which I don't know. I love Wittenberg's book about the first day at Chickamauga, because he really advocates for Minty and Wilder and what they did there. And
no, they did a very similar to Buford, right? They slowed the roll, allowed the Union to kind of, granted, Chickamauga didn't work out too well for the Union. Gettysburg was,
but they still slowed it enough. And I do,
but they didn't lose the whole army. They were able to get back into Chattanooga. They didn't get completely destroyed, which they could have.
I do agree with Wittenberg that Minty and Wilder saved Rosecrans from absolute decimation, because not only does it not only does it slow them down like the Confederates and fuck them up hard, but it forces Bragg to go back and be like, shit, I got to rethink my battle plan. You know, like I can't do what I wanted to do because these two guys with like quarter, like, you know, however many men, like they're down, like the Confederates outnumber them. But, you know, the amazing thing is, and there's a YouTube video that shows how the Spencers worked. And it's amazing. Like these guys were just like, so they did very similar to what Buford did. You know, they have men that stand back and hold the horses, and a few of them go forward, but they're firing 7 shots at a time. Yeah. So the Confederates also have to be in battle line. Then they go back, get on their horses, ride back a few hundred yards. The Confederates have to get back in marching order and march again. And then what does Wilder do? Burns the bridge.
No, he did everything right. He really
doubles down.
Did.
He's like, you assholes are not getting across here. You know, and good for them for doing that, because they do. And the book by Wittenberg is Holding the Line at the River of Death, and it's very good.
Eric is the he's the when you're talking cavalry, he's the
guy. I'm actually I downloaded the audiobook of his book about Buford at Gettysburg, and I'm a little bit of maybe a quarter of the way into it. It's very interesting. Frank says $970 for 4 nights.
Oh my goodness gracious! Where is that? 1863 probably.
Yep.
Well, that's a 2 something a night. I guess that's what it is. I mean, unfortunately,
yeah.
That's. But you know what though, it's
Frank, you're going to have an awesome time, and it's going to be something you remember for the rest of your life too. So yeah. You're there for. You can say you were there for the 160th.
You know, that'll be a good time. I think this would be nice, but there's going to be a lot of people. We're coming in Thursday morning. We should be ahead of the first wave. We'll be able to hopefully get to some restaurants that night before the onslaught comes on Friday. But good luck getting into blue and gray the next weekend, Mary. It ain't gonna happen. It is not going to happen. We're gonna have to go to our little bars out of town that we know. The local yokel places like Thirsty Farmer. We're gonna have to go to.
Yeah. Thirsty Farmer's cool, and to Battlefield Brew Works as well, which is a Confederate hospital.
Yeah, it's right off of York Road there. There's a lot of cool places to go. But I'm glad people are going. It sounds like, just looking at on the social media stuff, it sounds like, I mean, if Frank's paying that much a night, that means obviously a lot of people are going. It's gonna be a lot of people. And I hope Vicksburg has a lot of people this weekend too. I mean, we get these anniversaries on a weekend, so people get to come down. And so
you know who's going to be advocating for Vicksburg is Leonard.
Where's Leonard been by? I haven't seen Leonard in a while.
He's around. He's advocating for Bowen. He loves Bowen.
The gallant Bowen. Yeah, but he's he's definitely the Vicksburg guy. But you're right, though, Tullahoma's the other thing. I mean, Tullahoma admittedly is not at the level of Vicksburg, Gettysburg. I get it, but it's still a cool battle to study. It just is. But you know, the big boys this weekend is going to be something. And July 4th in Gettysburg is going to be a lot of fun this year.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there's so much to do outside of Gettysburg. So if you're there and you find it's too busy for you, get in your car. I mean, if you've rented one or whatever, you have one, and drive to Monocacy and see that, because that anniversary is coming up quite soon too. Lew Wallace there saves the Union Army. And I've always loved Lew Wallace. I hate what Grant did to him at Shiloh. He's a complete scapegoat for Grant, because Grant can't go and blame Sherman for, getting caught off guard. But he gets called back and he's like, I'm going to save the day. And he does. He slows them down. And that's what's important, because, and I know people say like, oh, it wouldn't have mattered if Early had gotten to Washington, or he never would have anyway. We don't know that. But even if Early gets in for a day, what does that do for morale?
Yeah, that changes a lot. I mean, it's kind of like, what if William C. Oates, takes a Little Round Top? He's not going to hold it, but it could be substantial. But again, taking Washington would have been tough, at least temporarily. But that's why if you go to Fort Stevens and you can maneuver through all the empty beer cans that are all through there, because that's how that is, unfortunately, you can get an idea of the terrain and see what they were fighting. It was one of several forts that surrounded Washington. It was Fort Stevens is probably, 4 miles from downtown. So it's pushed back a little bit, heading towards Silver Spring, Maryland. But it's a cool little visit, but it's not the best area. It's like Missionary Ridge.
God, Missionary Ridge was like, I mean, I'm glad we saw, that was so cool seeing that, what was that, the Pennsylvania monument, which is the exact same one as they have at Gettysburg. That was so cool seeing that.
Yeah, it was the same exact one, which is kind of neat. That's why it's cool to travel and see some of these too. Is as much as we love the ones we always go to, but going out to Chattanooga, Chickamauga, Lookout Mountain, there's so many, because it's different, and especially when you go out to, if you go to Gettysburg a lot, take a day trip, spend the night down in Fredericksburg, and go to Spotsylvania and Chancellorsville and Fredericksburg, and go over to Caroline Street and empty some beer cans. By the way, do that too. But there's
awesome.
but you'll see the difference.
It's great too. Chattanooga's got a great brewery. I wish we knew the name of our bartender there because she was so cool.
Oh, in Chattanooga?
Yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about her. That was pretty sweet.
Yeah, that place, she was awesome. She was really, I don't know, Southern hospitality. There's something about it. Just, I mean, great customer service everywhere. But Chattanooga, there's something about it. But too, like, also to see all the battles on the Atlanta campaign as well. I was talking to a guy at one of the Braves games. His son plays for the team, and he was from Georgia. And I told him that you and I had been down there, and he's like, "Oh, did you see some of the battles in the Atlanta campaign?" I'm like, "Yep."
Yeah, people
knew exactly what I was talking about. I'm like, "Oh yeah, we saw Pickett's Mill, we saw Jonesboro, all that." And it's funny, I had to send an interlibrary loan to Jonesboro the other day.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, I was
Jonesboro's a cool. If you're in the Atlanta area, you find yourself down there. It's maybe a half an hour south of Atlanta, if that, with the traffic heading towards Andersonville there on that highway. But it's worthwhile going to. And I don't know why the hell we were going. I think we were looking for a bar or something, weren't we?
No, we just saw it and we were like, "Oh shit, that was on the Atlanta campaign." Oh, and quick shout out, Jen Rowling is on here. She said, "Hi." Hey. She said, "Can Kirsten and I camp in your backyard?" Hey, Jen, are you going to be in Gettysburg for the anniversary? God, it's been years since I've seen. Well, I shouldn't say years. It was pre-pandemic, which seems like eons ago.
Well, that'd be cool if they were coming down.
She's cool.
She does General Grant sighting in Gettysburg. Or Sherman sighting in Gettysburg.
I didn't think that was allowed.
Somebody will get pissed off.
He does portray Sherman really well, by the way.
No, I've seen the pictures.
Yeah, he's very good. Yeah. But yeah, she's also an amazing artist. We have her artwork she did of General Grant. Sherman.
I have.
Yeah, I gave that to you.
Yep. Right here, Jen Rowling.
Yep.
That we look at all the time. So this is all her stuff. So.
Yep.
And we did not know you were jumping on, but we did not know she was going to come on. I just happened to have it right in my little desk.
No, I haven't talked to her in a while. To reach out to her and have a chat.
Yeah,
she's awesome. She and I had a lot of fun at Sherman's birthday party with Chris. Mm-hmm. That was a fun night. We got in trouble for talking too loud.
I'm not surprised at all.
She and I were up dancing to Marching Through Georgia.
Oh, that must have gone over well.
No, and then they played the Old Crow Medicine Show version of it, which is great. And then they had this play that Grant and Sherman did. It was actually really well done. And the Sherman reenactor who did it, he was really good. And so was the Grant reenactor too. The Grant reenactor actually is an author, and he just released a book about Sherman's, I think, something to do with Sherman, which I really want to read.
No, that's pretty cool. No, I see people can do that if they have a passion for it. But he does look like him, though.
Oh, he does.
I've not met him, admittedly, but I've seen the pictures that you showed me now.
Yeah, I mean, cool. Jen and I had breakfast the day after, and he's just like, sure, like, it's like he's so much like Sherman. He's just one of these guys that can embody the person that he is, and he takes it quite seriously, but he's very good at it. And Jen knows her stuff about Sherman. I don't know, she would be my go-to Sherman guy. She said LOL. But yeah, her artwork is pretty amazing.
No, she does. She has a lot of good stuff. So we have a couple different books that she did here.
Yeah, we got Sherman and we got Grant.
There's one picture in here I'm trying to find, admittedly.
Oh yeah, it's one. I think I know the one you're trying to find.
Yeah, I can't. I'm gonna have to look through. I know this is
Grant or Sherman, but it's
no.
Really...
hold on a second. I know this is not what people want to see, but
no, but it's great to showcase her artwork because she's really
this
good.
One. I know somebody wants a
oh
Howard
my
one
god!
Like this one,
no, I don't. She's that one.
I don't know what kind of things are going through Jen's mind when she makes this, because I don't know if that's Marching Through Georgia or what, but yeah, that's a great picture. There's a whole bunch of good pictures.
She drew one for me for my birthday, which is awesome. Actually, you know what? She drew Howard for me for my birthday one time. Just like it was like a kind of a headshot of Howard. It was so good.
That's pretty good. He has those cut abs. He must ride a horse with one arm, Mary. speaking of Sherman, hello, is this thing on? No, but that's pretty cool. Hopefully if she can't make it, hopefully we'll definitely see her soon. But no, her artwork is pretty legit though.
Yeah.
Well, we have these books here. We take
No, and she's fun to hang out with. You get her going about Sherman. She said, we'd like to try and come out. I'm trying to get off work so we can have it Friday night. Awesome. Yeah, well, let us know if you're in town. We're doing an event on Saturday, so out at Spangler.
Cool. That'd be cool to hang with her. That'd be pretty sweet.
She's like, oh my God, you guys. She went out one picture.
The sad part is you probably will do a shirt. God, I can only imagine a big fresco on the ceiling of Howard with his abs but anyway, that's another story. But that's cool. But no, but that'd be fun. So that'd be pretty cool. So if we could meet her, that'd be neat. Meet some different people down in Gettysburg. Some people we've known for a while, and you've met her, but I haven't met her. I'd love to meet her.
Yeah, no, she's a lot of fun. She's a lot of fun.
Yeah, that'd be
good. She's a good person. She's like, 100% genuine. She's cool.
I think being genuine is about as important of a characteristic as you can possibly be.
It is.
There's no doubt about that. I wish I could draw my straw like that. I can't even draw my tongue off. I can't draw.
Neither can I. No.
I've seen you cannot draw. I've seen your sad attempts to draw. But that's going to be a busy weekend. So hopefully, like I said, we'll be out and about. So look to hang out with as many people as we can. We'd like to anyway.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. You see us come over, say hi. When we've got the event at Fourscore, we're going to be at Eric and Jim's event on Friday night at the Mine at 8:00. So that's really cool that they're doing that. They're doing a get together because apparently they're still podcasting, despite what people are saying.
Yeah, I don't know what that can look. That whole thing is strange, but I will say, Jim Hessler, Eric Lindblade, their podcast is awesome. Everybody knows that their podcast. And they
put a lot of work into it because they're also licensed battlefield guides and they have jobs on the side, I think too.
Pretty cool. But we'll definitely be going to their event at the Reliance Mine, 8 p.m. on the 1st?
8 p.m. on the 30th.
On the 30th. Okay, so that'll be pretty cool.
Before our stuff.
But there's going to be a lot of cool stuff. But I'm looking forward to it. And if you can't get out to Gettysburg, try to get out to do something. Hell, at least watch the damn movie Gettysburg. That's what I would do. If I can't go to Gettysburg on the anniversary, I would always try to watch.
And if you're not in town, there's a lot of virtual stuff happening. So check that out. Also, if you're not in town and you want to check out something virtual, or even if you are in town and you have time, just remember, Ryan Diamond is doing a talk. I think it's going to be live streamed about Phil Kearney, which should be interesting. He's, we know so many people on here who are not they don't have their PhDs, and you know what? That doesn't matter because they're just as passionate about it and they know their shit. And they study it hard. And
I respect anybody who goes and gets their credentials.
I do too. That's cool. But you know what? If you do that, you have to still be a good person, and you still have to accept the fact that some people don't get their PhDs and they're equally as passionate as you. They know just as much stuff, but and some of them have full-time jobs doing something else, and it doesn't matter. What matters at the end of the day is telling the story of these people and keeping it real. Every opinion is welcome. It matters, all that, but keep it real, and you still matter even if you don't have a PhD. You still have a voice in this field.
No, because you can study. That's what's great about history, is you can study it. If you're studying history at a high level, you can start to look at some of the cracks in the armor, some of the stuff, and that's what makes it really, really cool.
And also, whether you like a Union or Confederate, like them, study them. It doesn't matter. I love studying Howard, but you know what? I also love studying Claiborne and Beauregard. I find them both fascinating, but guess what? It doesn't mean I subscribe to what they believed or what they fought for.
Speaking of Howard, how about this one, Jen? Oh my God. That would be good. She'd probably love that one. I don't know what the heck's going on here with these pictures, admittedly.
Ryan said, thanks. Dodgy lawyers are amongst some of the best historians.
Yeah, no question about it. There's more time to do it. So, but this, it's definitely battle season. Get out there and about. If you are going to Gettysburg and you want to get the hell out of Dodge a little bit and get away from the crowds, like we said a million times, Monocacy is not far away. Harper's Ferry is not far away, and Antietam is not far away. There's places you can go to get away from the people and still see your history. There's a lot of cool places to go. But this is going to be the the question we have.
Yeah. Ryan, did you see his comment?
Well, he had 38 kids, so he probably answered that question.
38 kids.
He's like the
You know what,
Kevin
we
Garnett of
actually-
the Civil War.
You know, one thing too, like, something cool I found out about Howard, and I tweeted about it, put it on social media yesterday, is he had, and I knew this, I just never really talked about it before, but he had a kid that was born May 3rd, 1863, tail end of Chancellorsville. Howard calls him Chancey. And
Yeah,
he
that's
wrote
kind
his-
of a
he wrote-
baller
he-
call, by the way.
He wrote his wife and said, I want to remember this battle. Let's call the kid Chancey. And she goes with it.
Yeah, well, hey, you know what?
Pretty
That's
good. And that is just so cool. And I found a picture of him, Chancey, and Chancey has on his Sons of Union Veteran medal and his 2 grandsons.
yeah. That you found some good pictures this week of Howard.
Yeah.
You spent a lot of time. We sit out here in the deck over here, and she Googles, Olive Rodas Howard after dark, and she finds these pictures. But she did find a whole bunch of really good ones that we hadn't seen before. And there's that one picture of him in the graduation outfit at
Which we have
Bowdoin.
not been able to find.
We saw it up in Bowdoin, and we haven't found it anywhere else. So that's a cool picture too. And that's what settled the debate, by the way, Mary, of him going to the Chamberlain house that I was correct about.
I know, I said that. I admit
just-
I was wrong.
I remember. I'm just going to sit over here and be correct, because that
You
was a
were.
fun little debate. You were all mad. Urgh.
I'm
You were
going to
all
own
fired
that
up.
wrong. I'm going to own it.
Hey, that's
so
a good
Jen-
thing. That's a good thing.
Jen mentions that she made that one picture you showed into a towel for the Sherman House and raised $300. I remember we were helping her promote that.
I remember that. That was a
That's
couple of
fun.
years ago. That was a
That
while
was just
ago.
a year ago.
Was it? I thought it was
Yeah.
longer.
I think so.
The time blurs after a while.
No, that
But,
was
but-
like Jen does. I think she still does, but she's connected with the Sherman House in Ohio, which is that's a cool place to visit.
Mhm. No, it definitely is. Definitely is. So we're gonna get ready to jump off here, Mary. It's almost it's 11:15. We usually try to get up at 11:45. It's gonna be warm today. It's warm today.
We can sit
It is,
outside and just we're taking it easy today. Low-key day. for
Yeah,
us.
we're gonna take it slow today because yesterday was a situation. So
Mm.
we're gonna have a good day. So all right. So we'll be doing the Howard episode here in a couple of weeks once we get back. So a lot of events coming up this weekend. We talked about if you can get out to the battlefield, do it. So we have our event on the
July the 1st at 4:30.
4:30 at
There is
Spangler.
parking out there, so just drive out there. It's free. If you would
Yeah,
like,
Yeah, I was saying normally you got to take the shuttle bus out there. So
And
we've
pay.
arranged and pay. So we've arranged a free tour and you get to park on site. So that's pretty
Yep.
sweet. And it's after everybody else is gone. It's like getting to Disney after all the tourists leave. It's a private thing.
Yep.
So definitely come to that. And then we're going to be doing a 4-score event afterwards. Just going to be hanging out, just kind of chilling. And then we'll find some other stuff to do. But definitely try to get out to the stuff. American Battlefield Trust is doing an event at the Lee headquarters on the night of the 30th. Jim Hessler and Eric Lindblad are doing their get together at their Alliance Mine at 8:00 that night. And there's gonna be a ton of stuff going on. So and take as much stuff in, embrace it all. Bring your sunscreen, bring your tick spray, bring your Pedialyte. It's gonna be a big weekend.
yep, bring your anti-snake repellent if there is such a thing.
And bear spray. We need bear spray
Oh,
this
God.
time. Remember you were freaking out about the bear in Maine?
Yeah, because you were scaring. You were like, there might be bears.
No, there probably there were bears, but I just
Oh, Ryan said he's going to email us a story about Carney and Howard. Yes, we'd love that. Thank you.
yeah. If you have
Party
one,
story. Yeah, definitely do that. Yes, thank you, Ryan.
No, definitely do it. So, all right, guys. So we'll look definitely forward to seeing as many of you as possible over the weekend. We'll have a lot of fun. It's gonna be a great weekend. Stay safe. Be cool to one another. That's the most important thing. And always respect everyone's opinion, whether you agree with it or not. All right. So off we go, Mary. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll talk to you, Mary, here in like 30 seconds. But the rest of us, let's have a good weekend. Have a good productive work week and enjoy the weekend. It's anniversary. It's Gettysburg weekend and it's Vicksburg weekend and it's Tullahoma weekend. So go find your history, go find your nerd, and go find your beers and have a hell of a weekend.
Yep. Oh, thank you, Charles. He said, great discussion as usual. Enjoy your Sunday, everyone. Thank you, Charles. Thank you to everyone for coming and hanging out with us for this silly little thing that we do. We appreciate all of you. You're awesome. So thank you.
All right. All right, guys. Enjoy. We'll talk to y'all soon.
Yep. See you guys.